Part of me is loyal to something, but part of me is not. Part of me is scared of it. Part of me doesn't know if I can do it. Part of me is very leery of the cost. If I really stick up for this part of myself, what if my life as I know it crumbles?
So in order to experience self-betrayal, we have to have that moment that we have participated in this outcome, that we have abandoned our own values or abandoned our needs or abandoned our truths.
I love that you raised what is the cost? Because I think that's probably the thing. What's the cost of showing up to that appointment with ourselves? Well, it might be scary. It might actually ask a lot of us. And then, as you say, ambivalence enters the picture. So we might wonder, when we don't manage our ambivalence well, that's when we betray ourselves. Yeah, there's also the way that when someone does something to us, how we respond. We can either, stand up for ourselves or sometimes we sort of capitulate, right? And there are those times where that's a self-betrayal. I mean, I'm thinking about, and I wrote about this in The Vital Spark, this woman that I worked with, who had just been really trying to, go along to get along or get along to go along with her husband for years. They had kids and she was just trying to do the right thing and trying not to, she was kind of conflict averse and she didn't want to make waves. And, by the time 2 decades of married life rolled around, she'd realized that she'd been very complicit in a massive self-betrayal because she had never stood her ground on some things that really mattered to her. And so that was a self-betrayal first and foremost, but it also was a betrayal of the relationship because you can't expect for a relationship to be healthy and to grow when you're not able to show up for yourself in it.
Gosh, I just think that's huge, actually, that we don't show up for ourselves. And there are all kinds of, quote, good reasons, unquote, for that. That's okay. I can let this go. That's okay. I can overlook it. Oh, it really matters to the other person. Or, my colleague so-and-so has been with a company much longer than I have. That is the person that deserves the raise or the promotion.
Mm-hmm.
We don't show up for ourselves. And that takes me to one possible ingredient in this is our fear of conflict, of don't rock the boat, and the fear that there will be severe repercussions if we do that. That people will say, well, then, okay, you're fired. Why don't you just go get another job then if you don't like it here? Same thing in relationships, neighborhoods, committees. The list goes on and on. I think underneath it is the fear of being exiled.
I mean, I think that's part of it, but I
Yeah.
also think though that it can be lots of things, like going back to Peter falling asleep. It's almost like we have trouble sort of staying vigilant, sort of staying connected with ourselves. It's making me think of pretty much one of my favorite Jim Hollis quotes, which is he says in Mythologems, he says, "We all have an appointment with ourselves, and most of us never show up for it." And I just love that. And I think that's true. Again, it's true in little daily ways, and it's true in big lifelong ways too. And hopefully we show up at least some of the time. We're never going to show up all of the time because we're fallible. So again, we fall asleep even when we said, no, this matters so much, I'm going to stay awake, but then we don't.
And I think that the word betrayal lends a certain kind of intensity to the realization that we've done that. So in order to experience self-betrayal, we have to have that moment that we have participated in this outcome, that we have abandoned our own values or abandoned our needs, as you had said about the marriage, or abandoned our truths.
Yeah.
Which also suggests that you actually know what your values are, you know what your needs are, and you know what your truths are. So it may be that it's quite a long time later that you have that experience of self-betrayal. Just as you were using the example of this woman from the Vital Spark, it was really long into it
Yeah.
that she identified consciously what her values or needs were, and then realized that she had been betraying herself over and again.
So one of the things you're raising is that self-betrayal usually happens unconsciously.
Quite so.
We're not even aware we're doing it.
And there is a rupture at that point, and we have this sense of alienation from, at the very least, the image of who we believed ourselves to be. And perhaps if we do know ourselves well, then we're alienated from even a deeper level, which, frankly, I think can lead to a growth period, because self-betrayal, I think, pulls us into kind of a self-inquiry. It makes us quiet and draws us inward. It makes us sober about the thing.
I'm thinking this might be a good time to ground this in some examples.
Yeah.
And I'm starting with the example you offered of Gethsemane and Peter's betrayal of Jesus, and the relationship between self-betrayal and ambivalence. Of that part of me is loyal to something,
Yeah.
but part of me is not. Part of me is scared of it. Part of me doesn't know if I can do it. Part of me is very leery of the cost. Like, if I really stick up for this part of myself, what if my life as I know it crumbles? So, of honoring those parts of ourselves, of those mixed emotions that we have toward all kinds of things, and that's not the problem. The problem isn't that we have mixed feelings. The problem is that we can't surface all those mixed feelings into consciousness and go, oh my gosh, what if I do stay up all night for this guy? What's likely to happen to me? Well, that's pretty scary. Okay, now what? We just sort of take our little airbrush and go, whoop, and we go to sleep. In some way, go unconscious, getting rid of the ambivalence and our need to face it.
Deb, I think that's really great. I think it's a wonderful distinction to get into. And also I love that you raised what is the cost? Because I think that's probably the thing. What's the cost of showing up to that appointment with ourselves? Well, it might be scary. It might actually ask a lot of us. I mean, what if I ask myself what I want? If I really admit that to myself, I might have to work hard, let's say. What if I admit to myself that there's some things about my marriage I really don't love? Then I might have to know that, which is pretty uncomfortable, and then I might have to do something about it. So I think that there's all kinds of ways where we don't want to have to pay the cost of remaining true to the feelings, the values, the attitudes. And then as you say, ambivalence enters the picture. So we might wonder if it isn't when we don't manage our ambivalence well, that's when we betray ourselves.
And often I think that we're not even aware that we're ambivalent until it trips us up in some way, until there is a cost.
Right.
Because we can be quietly ambivalent and then just shunt aside decisions or actions because we can't find a place to stand that allows us to take action. But I think in the examples that we had given, the idea of Peter falling asleep, or all of them falling asleep, is this idea of lethargy. And that lethargy can be something that invades us. And then we find that we're, just as you were saying, Lisa, we're not showing up for the appointment. And the other is fear. And when I think about in the Gethsemane experience that Christ is denied, I mean, that's fear driven, that there's a repercussion for you to declare your alignment with a value or a person or a political movement or a religious belief. And that in the face of certain fear that we will pretend that we are someone else or we don't actually have that value. I also want to say that one can make an argument for that being adaptive. But for some of us, later on in that dark night when we are alone, for some of us that feels like a betrayal, that we have been treacherous to whatever we believe our values are. I think also you were saying, Lisa, about the woman who was ambivalent about leaving the marriage and just insecurity, that I do not feel secure in my own capacity to create, my own capacity to make change and to create something new, that to have those internal resources. And Deb, you were saying earlier something about the need for external validation, that it takes a lot of energy to individuate from the culture that we're in. And so we will betray, again, our true desires, our true needs, in exchange for that, bag of silver, so to speak, which is whatever the approving smile from the community around us.